Hello folks, this is Katie, and I'm sorry it took a long time to get to this video, but I've been really busy. Um, but yeah, so hopefully you stuck around and you're ready to hear my second video, mohaha. This video isn't actually about gender queerness or gender or transness or anything at all, um, but it was inspired by a conversation I had with a friend of mine. She recently came out to me as bisexual, um, and one day I was talking to her and she expressed what she felt like as bisexual she wasn't really like legitimate enough to be called queer. She felt like she's not queer enough to be part of the queer community because she's only a bisexual. That somehow there's a hierarchy of identities within the queer community and that bisexuality is low on that hierarchy, so she didn't deserve like to be respected as a member of the queer community. And of course, I felt that that was kind of a ridiculous assertion, um, and I was sorry she felt that way. But I kind of wanted to make a video addressing that subject, the myth of queer identity hierarchies, and and again, I don't think they exist. But I would like to start by asking, first of all, if there's a hierarchy of queer identities, then and if some people are more queer than others, then there has to be a way to measure queerness. And so how do you measure queerness? Are there like points? Like, oh, like I got short hair, so that's like 2 queer points, and I'm wearing rainbows, so that's like 3 queer points. Like, is that it? Um, no, like there's no way to measure how queer somebody is. Um, and so it's impossible to put people in order. And some people kind of have the attitude that like the more obscure your identity is, the more queer you are. For example, like I would be very queer because I'm sort of pansexual, sort of lesbian, sort of whatever, and I'm genderqueer, and I like potentially trans, I guess you could say. Um, but when I talked to my friend, she ranked people in order from starting with lesbian and gay, and then like putting trans people next, and then bisexuals and stuff are way down at the bottom. Um, and so, just the fluidity of the order that people think queer identities go in, I think is proof that there isn't an order that queer identities go in. And so the next point that I would like to address is that, like, how can you measure the legitimacy of someone's identity? Because I think the only thing that that makes an identity legitimate is that someone identifies as that. Someone calls themselves that, and in doing so, they they demonstrate that they have thought about it and that it's important to them, so much so that they're willing to embody it and tell other people about it. Um, and I think that that is legitimate enough. Like, how can one one way of being be more legitimate than any other way of being? Overall, I think that no one's there's no way that anyone's identity is more legitimate than anyone else's. People would like to think they are, but it's really ridiculous. And really, I think this comes down to the issue of privilege. Hello, folks. Sorry about the interruption. I was in my dorm room and my roommate was coming in the door right as I was making the video, so I changed locations and now I'm in a practice room, which is where I spend most of my life as a music major. That's my viola. I'm buying it. It's really exciting. It's also very expensive. Anyway, but I was talking about how this whole myth of queer hierarchy, or the supposed myth of queer hierarchy, I think really comes down to the issue of privilege. And just like there is privilege to like heterosexual people over queer folk, there is privilege that operates within the queer community. Um, for example, um, like lesbian and gay people are generally like more respected and more understood in the queer community, and if you're like genderqueer, even people in the queer community are like, oh, you're just trans, you don't know what you're talking about, or if you're bisexual, they're like, oh, well, you just are either on your way to becoming gay, or it's a phase, you just want an excuse to just experiment with people, or you're just promiscuous, you can't choose, you just want to have sex with everybody. Um, and so when we're talking about privilege, it's true that a lot of times bisexuals are treated as though they are less legitimate queer people than lesbians and gays. But I think that the difference between um, like legitimacy of identity and privilege is that identity has to do with your own feelings, um, whereas privilege has to do with how other people treat you. And let's face it, people aren't treated the same as even though they should be. Um, and so yeah, there are differences in how people are treated, if they are bisexual, for example, that would lead them to believe that that they don't deserve to be in the queer community as much as other people do. But privilege does not equal legitimacy. If you're more privileged, it does not mean you're more legitimate. For example, there are a lot of people that think that black people are less legitimate people than white people. And there are some people that think that able-bodied people are more legitimate people than less able-bodied people. Um, but the thing is, how can one type of person be a more real person than another type of person? That doesn't make sense to me. And so I feel like the same thing operates operates with identity, and you have to be careful not to confuse legitimacy and privilege. And it's silly, I think, that we argue so much about who is more queer than who else. Who gets to be in our club and who doesn't. I feel like anybody who is on the side of equality and who is on the side of respect and who is on the side of love, like I want them in my club. I don't know about you, but but I don't people don't need to prove themselves to me, like to prove that they deserve, to be in my club. Um, and also I think that queerness is more than just gender identity and sexual orientation. I mean, I think there are heterosexual queer people, because I think that being queer is kind of about breaking down binaries and and questioning heteronormativity and standing on the side of equality for all people. I think allies are queer people, so and they're in my club too. So I don't think they're any less legitimate than anyone else just because of who they like. You know, like judging people based on who they like, within the queer community is just as bad as judging as straight people judging people based on who they like or what gender they identify as. But yeah, those are my thoughts on that. Awesome. Um, if you have any other issues that you would like me to address, or anything that you'd like me to talk about, or any questions that you have for me, please let me know in a comment or a message. And I should be posting more videos sooner than I got to this one. So yeah, awesome. Thanks, YouTube.